Fox News alert, new fallout from President Trump's decision to withdraw from the Iran nuclear deal. The president saying the U.S. will institute, quote, the highest level of economic sanctions on Iran, and that any business which offers Iran help could also be punished. This is the leaders of Britain, Germany, and France vow to keep the nuclear agreement intact, saying in a joint statement, together we emphasize our continuing commitment to the JCPOA. This agreement remains important for our shared security, end quote. All this as Iran is saying it will continue its ballistic missile program, a big bone of contention with the West, and the Ayatollah is hinting at stepping up his country's nuclear program. Meanwhile, National Security Advisor John Bolton on what happens next.
The sanctions take effect immediately, so there's no new business allowed under the terms that are prescribed. For existing contracts, there are wind-down provisions that come into effect, and the Treasury Department and others will be laying those out in more detail. But obviously, our sanctions have enormous effect on Europe already. Licenses of American technology. If American companies can't use those licenses to sell to Iran, neither is anybody else. So we're going to be talking to the Europeans. We have a lot to do because we share the common objective. We don't want Iran with nuclear weapons.
All right, from the Business Network, it's important to get you on this, David, because you've got the perspective on what these countries are doing in terms of business. I had read German companies, something to the tune of $5 billion
it's huge.
With Iran.
And just take one company, Airbus, which sells a lot of equipment, not only new planes, but spare parts of planes to Iran. 10% of everything that they make comes from the United States, so there's a direct connection there. So we could say, look, if 10% of what you sell to Iran comes from us, we're going to have sanctions against you. It's the secondary sanctions. That's what John Bolton was saying.
Right.
Not so much sanctions against U.S. companies, but against European companies that deal with Iran. In what way is that going to screw up world trade? It's going to be very interesting. They didn't spell it out clearly in the memorandum that was issued.
Yeah, but
yesterday.
At least it's in there.
Yeah, but they didn't spell it out. They want to negotiate now over the next several months with the Europeans to figure out how to do it.
In that 90-day window, potentially.
Right.
Okay. And the reason I say that at least it's in there, we still don't know originally what were in those side deals.
Right.
So there could be business language in there. That's what experts have been telling me, but we don't know for sure. Some on Capitol Hill do know.
Boeing, for example, was looking forward to a $20 billion contract.
Yeah, I'm curious what happens with that.
Well, they're not going to get it anymore, but they weren't banking on that because they knew there could still be some complications.
So, Ainsley, I think this is so interesting that Iran was nearly boasting that it was going to go out and cut its own deal with some of those European nations. Germany, France leadership just here with our president, but they sign on to this agreement that they're going to continue to stay in the deal with Iran.
Well, of course they want America to be a part of this deal. We are the superpower, and they want our money, and they want our protection and our force behind them and their decisions. But this president ran on doing what's best for America, and he doesn't care how it affects France necessarily or how it affects the UK. He wants it to benefit America, and he's saying this deal was bogus. We weren't even allowed to send our inspectors into Iran to make sure they were doing what they were saying they were doing without giving them 30 days notice. Well, they were lying to us, and Netanyahu proved that to us last week with those images.
Yeah. Can we talk about the politics of this for a second? Because I caught a statement from Mitt Romney, and I don't remember that he was necessarily tearing down the Iran deal when it happened, but he is saying that it was definitely a non-starter for him today.
Right. Well, and look, I think it's also important here is to remember the fact that sanctions are what brought Iran to the negotiating table in the first place. And look, I mean, the reality is clearly Iran wants to be a nuclear power. We're either going to deal with that 10 years down the road when we've now enriched Iran with $100 billion, given them access to the international financial system, or we can deal with it now. And the Obama administration falsely and naively thought that Iran would temper their ambitions, temper their behavior because of this deal. And clearly all you have to do is look at Syria, Iraq, Lebanon, Yemen to see that that is very much not the case. So it's time to get tough, and it's time to get tough with sanctions.
But we saw the political point.
Yeah, just real quickly, but we saw the exact same response to pulling out of the deal that we saw getting into it, death to America. Like the language never changed.
They're burning American flags.
Yeah, let's go back to the politics.
They're burning American flags, saying death to America. They're now saying they're going to invest more money in the ballistic missile program, which again proves the point that all of the money that we gave them didn't go to the people, which is either out protesting, and they're really going to put themselves
themselves in a position where the economy continues to fail. I saw analysis the other day that the economy in Iran is worse than in Venezuela. And as we've covered Venezuela, we know that Iran is in a bad spot. But the politics here at home, it's interesting to watch people like Chuck Schumer come out and condemn the president for doing this when Chuck Schumer was one of 4 Democrats who actually was against the Iran deal from the beginning. Also Republicans who were against the Iran deal. Let's not forget that this was something that was voted on, not as a treaty, but there was a vote, about whether to approve or disapprove of the deal, and the majority of Congress voted against it. So the idea that this is any different than what Congress has actually asked for is absurd.
It's also the same thing with the announcement of moving the embassy to Jerusalem. How many people have been for that, have voted for that, and then came out against President Trump making the announcement saying that it's going to lead to destabilization?
Can I just say one other thing that Iran has been doing that we got to focus on is they're taking over parts of the Middle East. They just essentially completed through Hezbollah their takeover of Lebanon. They're moving. They're very much involved in Syria. They're very much involved in Iraq. They may end up taking over Iraq as well.
So what's so interesting about that is that it will take everybody on board on the same page. I had on Senator Ben Cardin, Democrat out of Maryland, yesterday, who's kind of speaking to the issue that you're talking about, Katie. As we go forward in this 90-day window, it's going to take everybody coming forth. You can't just bash what has happened that you like, that you don't like. And Ben Cardin got on the record about that. He said there's some certain things that I voted against it. That's what he said. He said, I was one of those Democrats who voted against it. Now I've got to step up and make sure that that conversation includes some of the things that were broken about it. The president, just a short time ago, we showed you inside that cabinet meeting that he was about to enter, which is off the record, but we got some comment ahead of that on what will happen to Iran if they threaten us. Watch.
I don't think they should do that. I would advise Iran not to start their nuclear program. I would advise them very strongly. If they do, there will be very severe consequence.
Now, I use the words threaten us because why would you need a nuclear program? Look, I mean, you're going to threaten your neighbors potentially. They're already doubling down on threatening Israel, going into what will be a celebratory event, 70th-year anniversary of Israel as a state next week. The U.S. Embassy moving to Jerusalem, a lot of activity.
But to bring it back home to what Katie was saying, people in the United States, senators, particularly the Democrats, but also some Republicans, have to separate their personal dislike for Donald Trump from the effects that he's having in diplomacy, which are dramatic, whether you're talking North Korea or Iran, because the effects are what people have to focus on.
It's un-American, isn't it? It's un-American for Chuck Schumer to support one thing at one point and not anymore just because he doesn't like this president. You have to think about the safety of our country.
That's right.
Imagine what our world would look like with Iran having access to nuclear weapons. Could you imagine? They kill Americans in Iraq. They're the #1 nation
They'd also
of
sell
terror.
them on the open market if they thought they could.
The good news is the Mossad went in and stole all of their files, so they're going to have to start over.
Yeah. Well, you know, I mean, we live in a country where everybody can say what they think and say what they, you know, how they feel. The point with Ben Cardin, though, that I wanted to drill down on is, okay, it's okay to think oppositionally, but now we got to get together and what can we shore up about what needs fixing in this deal. So not all Democrats feel the same way, he said.
That's right.
Last word?
Well, I think, unfortunately, those are the times we're living in this country. I mean, you can look at numerous examples with the Trump administration where people have been before on an issue, and now, just because it's the Trump or Trump nominee with Gina Haspel, as we mentioned on this couch, having supported John Brennan, even higher up have been involved in enhanced interrogations, and now somehow it's disqualifying for Gina Haspel.
By the way, you're free to say what you want in this country, but John Kerry, somebody should tell John Kerry, stop talking. You're not Secretary of State.
There are a lot of people who would like to tell him that.
Very bad negotiator. Remember that,